So, welcome to this Bioforum podcast looking at innovations and how they might be transformational for biomanufacturing. And today we're looking at digital twins or virtual twins. I'm David Wallace from Bioforum, and I facilitate collaboration between biomanufacturers, contract manufacturing organizations, and some of their IT providers. And with me today, welcome, is Kim Wilson from Dassault Systèmes, who is a wonderful contributor to my Bioforum team. And you'll see her name as a co-author of some of our publications relating particularly to IT for cell and gene therapies. But Kim also posts on LinkedIn about digital twins and virtual twins. And I want to know more. What are they? Why are they relevant to biomanufacturing? So Kim, actually, I'm not quite sure what a digital or a virtual twin is. Sounds science fiction-y. So what is it in reality?
Well, first of all, it's nice to be here with you. And digital twins and virtual twins are a topic that are very prominent right now in all of industry. In biomanufacturing, it's a little bit newer. So let's start with definition of terms. So a digital twin is a mathematical representation of a real world object or a system. Often they tend to be reproduced because they're kind of one-dimensional. They're kind of static models and they're in an isolated system. So a virtual twin 3D experience isn't limited to a mathematical model. It instead is dynamic, it's evolving, it's pulling in real world data continuously, and it's looking at the entire system of systems, including the operating environment. So that's what the key difference is. You're connecting a virtual twin with real-time data, and you're looking at various inputs to help you make better decisions.
So it sounds a bit like machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, you use machine learning and artificial intelligence to help you understand, all the data that's coming in, and it's helping make those decisions for you. But it's that constant feed of data into the system with real world information, and then that machine learning and AI that helps you see visually what's happening, and it helps you make decisions.
So what would be the benefits of us using a twin for biopharmaceutical manufacturing?
Well, biomanufacturing is kind of complex, and it's going to continue to be complex as new products are being developed and personalized medicine is coming into play, and that's going to be a bigger part of biomanufacturing in the future. As we've discussed in our CGT group, you've got smaller batches, you've got unique raw materials, you have a lot of manual processes, it's labor intensive, and all of that is expensive. So what could happen is you could look at a virtual twin of helping you to identify the process and how you might be able to make some changes, maybe add some automation, but you don't want to mess with a particular bioreactor of somebody's cells that's making a very coveted therapeutic. So if you could do that virtually and look at the impact of pressure and temperature and humidity and the raw materials concentration, then you could potentially optimize that production process. So that's what I would like to see people start to talk about.
So that's what's going on in the bioreactor for individualized cell therapy with all that variation from different starting cells and so on. But we also talk a lot about how there's challenges in the whole supply chain. Do you see any opportunity for modeling the supply chain as a twin?
Absolutely. And you could be looking at the raw material suppliers and then post processing as well as your product goes out the door for delivery. You're also going to be considering, in a regular biomanufacturing facility, not personalized medicine, all the factors, the equipment and maintenance schedules, and where are the raw materials, you pull them from stock, and what do they look like on the floor? These are the kind of things that you can look at in real time with a twin.
So in our cell and gene therapy biomanufacturers, but also with conventional biologics, a lot of our member companies are investing in new facilities. And sometimes they're those ballroom facilities where everything's reconfigurable. Is there an opportunity for twins in that environment?
Absolutely. Companies are doing that today, and we're working with some of them. And what they're doing is they're realizing that, well, some of this came from the pandemic, frankly, that the need to be more agile and flexible matters. And if you have a more modular facility, a ballroom concept, let's say, then you're going to have your equipment on wheels. You're going to have all the input flows coming in from external walls, and you're going to be able to move the production equipment around depending upon what you're making. So it's absolutely being used for this purpose.
But what's different, because we already have CAD design tools and 3D things that allow us to sort of position things on the floor. What's the extra that making it a virtual twin adds on top of that?
So you can look at it from like the plant, the product, the process, and the patient. That's how we like to, the 4 Ps. So for a plant, in an existing plant, you can consider adding equipment, doing an expansion. You can also look at where the equipment should go and any clash detection that would exist, ergonomics for safety for the people that are working in the facility. These are all the things you can do in an existing facility. Now, if you have a greenfield facility, you can design everything on, and make a virtual twin of it. And you could take 2D drawings. If you don't have 3D drawings, then you could scan an existing facility and maybe morph it into what you want the new facility to look like. You can use a catalog to bring in the equipment that you're considering. If you're going to adopt robotics, and that could be happening in the packaging area specifically, I'm thinking, you could look at different robot vendors and anticipate what the movement would be. We have software that does that, that is agnostic to a robotic company. We have almost 2,000 different robotics manufacturers in our arsenal that we pull from. And in the catalog, you're going to be looking at not only the equipment, but the conveyors, the piping. You're going to look at electrical, HVAC. All of that can be done. And then another consideration for the new facility might be a clean room. And you can look at HVAC related to that as well. So during COVID, we got a lot of experience working with hospitals. And in fact, if you'll recall, early in the pandemic, Wuhan put up some emergency field hospitals. They built them in weeks. And we were asked to look at the HVAC for one of these designs so that the people that worked there and the people that weren't sick could benefit and potentially not get sick. So we ran simulation models using a twin, and we were able to help them adjust the design.
And all of this was in that race to bring something, a new vaccine to market really quickly. What do you think are the key things that helped get things to market quickly that twins might be able to help with?
Well, there are a couple of factors that happened. The first one, which we can't ignore, is Operation Warp Speed, which allowed companies to invest because there's funding there. There were raw materials that were expedited to certain facilities so that they could continue their work. Manufacturers were actually, if they had a somewhat of a good candidate, were starting to manufacture in bulk, which they would never normally do because it's too expensive. And if you don't pass the clinical trials, then that would be a waste. So things were happening in tandem. In clinical trials, in some cases, they were doing, multiple phases at the same time. So that was unusual. The other thing that happened was clinical trials, people weren't going to a location the way you normally do a clinical trial because they weren't allowed or they were incapable. So, and the problem was people were dropping out of clinical trials. So one of our subsidiaries, Metadata, is a clinical trial company, and they launched a platform so you could do things virtually. And this way, the data would be coming in through the computer. The supplies would be sent directly to the patient's home, and this would all be monitored in real time for safety by the company that manages the clinical trials. So that was kind of innovative. In fact, Moderna used our cloud with metadata for their clinical trials. So that was unusual.
Yeah, so we're starting to see it's a broad concept, this digital twin, because it's drawing together those sort of virtual technologies we've become familiar with since COVID, I guess, but actually making it work for a clinical trials environment.
There were some interesting things that happened in addition using digital twins, and some of it may not be biopharma related, but I wanted to share. So think about it. There were companies like there was a Cascade lacrosse helmet company. There was a snowboarding company. These were both in the US, and they shut down their manufacturing because they had to. They weren't essential, and they flipped to producing face shields. Other companies produce PPEs. So in many cases, they were using twins to redesign that, particularly where that made a lot of sense was if you were making ventilators. And there were companies that released their footprint on how to create a ventilator, and we used digital twins to realign the manufacturing process. So although it isn't biopharma related in that case, people are using twins to generate PPE.
So if you have your twin in place, it actually creates the environment where you have the capability to be really agile in reconfiguring what you're producing. And I suppose people talk about tech transfer as being one of the sort of the slow processes about getting things to market. Do you think that digital twins have a place to play in that?
They do. The fact that you can accelerate process development, you can take what you're doing at lab scale, which is typically what's happening in biopharma, and you want to take it into the plant. You can model that and then simulate that and do continuous feed updates. And that is what allows you to do the tech transfer more effectively.
Yeah. What about MedTech? Some of those combination products where it's not just the drug substance, but the delivery, injector thing or something like that. Is that a sort of somewhere that twins can play a part?
Yes, it can be. In fact, if you think about it, MedTech has been adopting that for longer than biopharma has. So if you think of any, like automotive and aerospace and industrial engineering, or industrial equipment, I should say, they have adopted this long ago. And they've been able to demonstrate that if you use twins and you're getting this real-time data put in, you can design a product like a med device product and do iterative modifications of the product design, or retool it if it's in, it's in the marketplace and you want to redesign it. You go back to that original model. Everybody's on the platform. Everybody's communicating at once and can see the actual design. So in a combination product, you have that ability to retool the delivery device, like say an insulin pen, and then you're making maybe the insulin as an example. And then you want to combine the two. So you need to look at things like what's the viscosity, impact of adding, the insulin to the device, and what are the conditions that would impact its ability to be delivered effectively. Once you combine the device and the insulin in the manufacturing facility, then you have to carry that through the manufacturing facility for packaging and distribution. So you would want to simulate that as well for any adverse effects. So yes, I think combination products is a great application for twins.
Yes, and I'm seeing that it's not just the mechanical design of the delivery mechanism, but when you include the viscosity of the product itself, suddenly you're modeling a whole system, which includes the medicine as well as the delivery mechanism. Bioform is famous for its digital plant maturity model, and there's a third release in draft at the moment. And we talk about connected and predictive and adaptive levels of maturity in the biomanufacturing world. Where do twins fit in that sort of framework?
So I think right now it fits in the middle. You have to not be at the basic level because you need to have connectivity. You need to be using the IoT tools. If you can get to level 5 someday, that would be great. That would be ideal. But I think it's workable if you're in level 3 and 4.
Now, that's a surprise. I thought you would be saying it was at level 5. So if we've just got some basic connectivity of all our plant equipment and quality and so on, then you reckon we can do some meaningful digital twinning?
I think you'll end up doing maybe isolated twins. You may not have the system of systems experience if you're not approaching level 5. But what I would encourage people to do if they're not doing this today is to get started. You could look at just a twin of your plant or a twin of a process. Once you get started and you see the benefits of the collaborative effects within your organization and a direct input, let's say if it's a plant, an output of improving your cost or your personnel or your equipment maintenance. These are things that are directly transferable into the bottom line. And then you take that up the ladder to management and the business, and they start to see the value in it. And it would pay for itself over time. So that's why I would say, ideally you want to be at level 5, but realistically, who's there?
So you talked about getting started with twins. What do you think are some of the key things that biomanufacturers should be thinking about in order to make it possible to have twins or to do these smaller scale twins that you've described?
The company needs to get on board. It's a paradigm shift. It needs to come from the top that they're going to make this change. They're going to look at the real world data coming into the system and providing actionable insight. I mean, there's so much data that companies collect.
We're drowning in it.
Yeah, and what do you do to contextualize that so that it is actionable? And this whole approach needs to come from the top. And if people are supportive into getting started, then I think it will be easy for them to see the translatable nature of expanding it so that you could do the whole environment where you're looking at the plant, the process, the product, and eventually the patient you're going to be improving the outcome for the patient, which is why we're all here.
So this has been happening already in aerospace and car manufacturing and even in heart research. I've seen some of your case studies. They're marvelous. But what are the obstacles in biomanufacturing? Why has it not happened here yet? What's stopping us?
I think, we're looking at it's like you're baking, right? You're making something, you're having a chemical reaction, and there's a lot going on. And my impression is that people have been doing it a certain way for so long, they don't want to touch anything because it's a highly regulated environment. It's kind of like I make the cake every time, and even though the humidity goes up or my altitude goes up, I don't want to touch it. And this is where I think we can make advances. If you set up the twin, you could troubleshoot some things in the twin. You're not impacting the current manufacturing process, but you're gaining valuable insight. And as you gain that insight, then you can start tweaking your process, always within the frame of the regulatory
Yes.
process that you've already validated.
So alongside that really robust process, we can build a twin of it in order to think about it and do what ifs on it, but that doesn't change it while it's working. So
Right.
we must be using data that's already creating some kind of twin. Very good. So given that, what's the most important thing biomanufacturers can do to prepare the way for this to be really effective in future?
As I said earlier, it's really important for the organization to support this and realize that the paradigm shift needs to happen. So I would get educated. I would bring people in and start talking about how could I impact my production process or my plant, and think of the things that are causing the most headache, the bottlenecks that exist, and identify where you want to start. So the other thing we haven't talked about is sustainability, and that is a huge topic. And the C-suite is committed to making advances there. And this is another area where we can look at twins to facilitate that.
Yeah, so there's like a big new theme where we not only have to help the patient satisfy our stakeholders, but also preserve the ecosystem of the planet. And so that, we want to be able to analyze what we do today and work out ways forward that will do that better using
So
twins.
yeah, I don't know if everybody knows this, but the global pharmaceutical industry is like 55% greater emissions than the automotive industry, which
Really?
when I heard that, I was kind of shocked. But it's because they're doing a lot of chemical mixing, they're using solvents, and they're creating a lot of waste and emissions for that. So there are ways, to potentially reduce that by doing simulations. And if you optimize your process, you can eliminate, you can make things faster, accelerate production, and eliminate some of that waste. And if you're not really analyzing your process, then you're not going to be able to solve that. Of course, you're going to be looking at ways to reduce energy and water consumption. There's this debate on whether you should use single-use bags or use the stainless steel container. Well, there are models that I've seen that are in, we have demos for it, where you can add in all of the elements and the impacts, and it will tell you which is better in your situation.
Yeah,
So
we have this instinct, don't we, that it must be better with less plastic bags or something. But what we want to do is to say, well, what does that do to water use and carbon and to emissions of pollutants and all of those factors? And that's a complex thing that's hard to get right just on instinct, isn't it?
There is, and there are some standards that have been created by an external firm, and those are used throughout industry to state, this is what you would look at if you're going to consider which would be better in your situation. It'll look at factors like the washing of the stainless steel that has to occur, and what do you do with that waste and the energy required to accomplish that task. Whereas a single-use application, it is plastic, but it doesn't use necessarily all of that energy, and creates a better sustainable product, frankly.
So sustainability is a key win for the C-suite. But what other things do you think are big opportunities using twins for biomanufacturers?
So there's a number of things, and it would depend on the company as to what they're looking to do. Cost of goods sold is something that the business would be looking at. If you could lower your operating expenses, if you could accelerate time to market, if you could reduce material and energy costs and improve quality, those are things to consider. And I'm thinking of a company that's just down the road from me in Framingham, Massachusetts in the US. It's a Sanofi facility. It was Lighthouse. It's digitally enabled. It's continuing manufacturing where the production process is connected with R&D. They use virtual twin technology to optimize the remote manufacturing. They use real-time data capture and analysis. And everything is digitalized and paperless. They're 80 times more productive than a regular facility. They can make medicine in less time for twice the number of patients and with a smaller environmental footprint. So that, to me, is an example of what another facility could do, another company could do, if they're, now that's a new facility, obviously, but you could make modifications in an existing facility as well. So these are the kind of things I think people need to think about when we're asking for them to consider a paradigm shift.
Fantastic. I've learnt a lot. There were a few surprises in there, which is good. I'm educated today. Thank you so much, Kim. And to our listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this Bioforum podcast about an innovation. I hope you've learned as much as I have today. For now, thank you very much, Kim, and goodbye until next time, everybody.